"David, please, we have nowhere else to go," my homeless sister sobbed at my door. I took her and her young daughter in, giving them a home. A month later, she vanished, taking my life savings with her. I stood in my empty house, shattered. Then, I walked to a hidden wall safe she couldn't find and opened it. She thought she had stolen my last dollar. She didn't know she had only stolen the bait. The real inheritance was secure, and my lesson for her was about to begin. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The bait. It was a cruel word, but an accurate one. $50,000, my entire liquid savings, left in a place that was secure but not impenetrable. It was a test, a final heartbreaking test of character for my younger sister, Sarah. A test I had, prayed she would pass, but knew in my heart she would likely fail. This was not a plan born of a single betrayal. It was the culmination of a lifetime of them. Sarah and I were raised under the same roof, but we grew into two entirely different species of human beings. I, the older brother, was a man of ledgers and logic, an accountant. I found comfort in order, in predictable outcomes, in preparing for the worst and hoping for the best. Sarah was a creature of chaos. She lived in a world of fleeting passions, of grand, unrealistic dreams, and of the perpetual, unshakable belief that someone else would always be there to clean up her messes. For most of her life, that someone was me. It started in our childhood. I was the one who would do her homework so she could go to a party. I was the one who would take the blame when she broke our mother's favorite vase. As we grew older, the stakes simply got higher. Her messes became more expensive. There were the gambling debts, accrued during a brief, disastrous love affair with a professional poker player. I remember that late-night call, her voice a frantic, tearful whisper. "David, I'm in so much trouble," she had sobbed. "These people, they're not nice. I owe them $10,000. They said if I don't pay by tomorrow, they'll—" I hadn't let her finish. I had drained my savings account, the money I was putting away for a down payment on a house with my then-fiancée Susan, and I paid the debt. "This is the last time, Sarah," I had told her, my voice hard. "I know, David, I swear," she had promised. I've learned my lesson, but she hadn't. There was always another lesson she refused to learn. There was the can't-miss business venture, a pyramid scheme selling exotic juices that left her bankrupt and owing her friends thousands. I stepped in again, negotiating with her creditors, paying them off in installments from my own salary. My wife, Susan, a woman of profound kindness but even more profound common sense, saw Sarah with a clarity that my brotherly love often blinded me to. "You're not helping her, David," she would tell me gently after each new disaster. "You're enabling her. She will never learn to stand on her own 2 feet as long as she knows you are there to catch her every time she falls." "She's my sister." "Susan," I would argue. She makes bad choices. Her heart is in the right place." "Is it?" Susan would reply, her gaze steady and knowing. "Or is her heart simply in the place that is easiest for her? Be careful, my love. A parasite can kill even the strongest tree." Susan's words were prophetic. The true tragedy, the event that set the stage for this final, desperate act, began when Sarah had her own daughter, my niece Emily. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought motherhood would change her, that the profound responsibility of caring for another human being would finally force her to grow up. For a while it seemed to. She married a decent man, held down a steady job. But the old patterns, the old restlessness were always there, lurking just beneath the surface. When Emily was 6, Sarah's husband was laid off from his job. It was a difficult time for them, a test of their partnership, a test which Sarah failed. Instead of supporting him, of tightening their belts and facing the storm together, she saw it as an injustice, a personal affront to the lifestyle she felt she deserved. She started gambling again, small at first, then spiraling out of control, chasing the fantasy of a single big win that would solve all their problems. It ended, as it always did, in disaster. He left her, unable to bear the weight of her lies and her debts. And Sarah, once again, was left with nothing but the consequences of her choices. And once again, she came to me. But this time it was Susan who opened the door. It was Susan who was then in the early stages of her own final illness, who sat with her at our kitchen table. I didn't hear their conversation, but I saw the result. Susan, my gentle, compassionate wife, emerged from that meeting with a look of cold, hard resolve in her eyes. "No more, David," she had told me that night. "We will help her get a small apartment. We will make sure Emily has food and clothes, but we will not pay her debts. We will not fund her fantasies. The cycle ends now." And it did for a time. But Susan knew, with the chilling foresight of someone who knows they are leaving the world, that I would be left alone to face Sarah's manipulations. And her greatest fear was not for me, but for Emily. The last few months of Susan's life were a masterclass in quiet courage and clear-eyed planning. While her body grew weaker, her mind, her fiercely protective, practical mind, became sharper than ever. Her focus was not on her own ending, but on the future she would not be there to see. Specifically, a future that would involve my sister, Sarah, and my niece, Emily. One evening, as we sat together, the setting sun casting long shadows across her sickbed, she took my hand. "David," she began, her voice weak but her words precise, "we need to talk about Sarah. We need to create a plan." "A plan?" I asked, confused. "What kind of plan?" "A plan B," she said, a faint, determined smile on her lips. "You are a good man, my love. Your heart is your greatest strength and your greatest weakness. When I'm gone, Sarah will come to you again. She will cry. She will tell you a story, and a part of you will always want to believe her. You won't be able to help it. But you cannot. You must not let her destroy what we have built. Not for your sake, but for Emily's." Her gaze was intense. "Emily deserves a future, David, a real future, a chance to break the cycle of her mother's irresponsibility, and we are going to give it to her. But we must do it in a way that Sarah cannot touch." And so, in the quiet, sterile atmosphere of that sick room, my wife, the woman I loved, designed the architecture of my revenge. It was not a plan of anger, but of profound strategic love. "First," she instructed, "we will establish an irrevocable trust for Emily. It will contain the bulk of our assets, the stocks, the retirement accounts, the house itself. It will be legally untouchable until she turns 25. You will be the sole trustee. It will be your sacred duty to protect it for her." "And for Sarah?" I asked. This is where Susan's brilliance, her deep understanding of my sister's character, came into play. "We will not cut her off completely," she said. "To do so would be to make her a martyr, a victim. It would only fuel her resentment. No, we will create a test, a final definitive test." Her plan was simple and devastatingly effective. "You will liquidate a portion of your remaining stocks," she continued. $50,000. You will keep it in cash at home, not in a bank, not in a high-tech safe. You will keep it in an old shoebox, in the back of your closet, a place of simple, old-fashioned security, a place that a desperate, unsophisticated thief might look. I stared at her, beginning to understand the chilling genius of her plan. "It's bait," I whispered. "It's a choice," she corrected gently. "When Sarah comes to you, and she will come, you will do as your heart tells you. You will take her in. You will show her kindness. You will give her a chance to do the right thing, to find a job, to be a mother. But you will not tell her about the money in the house. The $50,000 will be a silent, invisible test. If she chooses the right path, If she chooses to rebuild her life with honesty, then that money can one day be a real gift to help her start over. But if she chooses the easy path, if she chooses to steal it, she paused, her breath catching for a moment. Then you will know, without a shadow of a doubt, that the woman you knew is gone. And you will have my blessing, David. You will have my blessing to finally, completely, let her go. You will protect Emily, and you will let Sarah face the full, unshielded consequences of her own choices. Promise me, David. Promise me you will be strong enough to do this. I promised. It was the hardest promise I have ever made. After Susan passed, I executed her plan with the meticulous precision of an accountant closing his books for the year. I set up the trust for Emily, a legal fortress that protected her future. I sold the stocks and placed the $50,000 in an old dusty shoebox, tucking it away in the back of my closet, behind my winter coats. It felt like I was setting a trap in my own home, in my own heart. For 2 years, the shoebox sat there, a silent, heavy presence. And then, one rainy, wind-swept night, the doorbell rang, and there she was, Sarah, older, more worn, but with the same desperate theatrical panic in her eyes that I had seen a dozen times before. She was clutching Emily's hand, and they were both soaked to the bone. The story she told was a familiar one, a variation on a theme of bad luck and victimhood. She had lost her job, she said. Her landlord had evicted her. She had nowhere else to go. She wept, and Emily, a small, terrified echo of her mother, wept with her. "Please, David," she begged, "just for a little while, until I can get back on my feet." My promise to Susan warred with the sight of my shivering, frightened niece. I did as my heart and my wife's plan dictated. I opened the door. "Come in," I said. "You can stay as long as you need." For the next month, I played the part of the compassionate, slightly naive older brother. I gave them a home, I bought them food, I enrolled Emily in the local school. I gave Sarah every opportunity to prove Susan wrong. I printed out job listings for her. I offered to help her with her resume. I connected her with an old friend who ran a temp agency. She met every offer with a new, creative excuse. "I'm too emotionally fragile to work right now, David," she'd say, her eyes welling with tears. "I just need a little more time to heal." "My confidence is shattered," she'd claim another day. "I'm not ready to face rejection." But while she was too fragile to look for a job, she had plenty of energy for other things. I watched her. I listened. I saw her spending hours on her phone, not looking for work, but scrolling through luxury travel websites. I overheard her hushed, excited phone calls to old, disreputable friends, speaking in the coded language of get-rich-quick schemes. She wasn't healing. She was waiting. She was hunting. I knew what she was looking for. And I knew, with a certainty that felt like a cold stone in my stomach, that it was only a matter of time before she found it. The final act of her self-destruction played out with a grim, almost theatrical predictability. I had given her a month of safety, of stability, of unconditional support, a month to choose a different path. It was a test I had desperately, foolishly hoped she would pass. The discovery of the bait was, I'm sure, the result of a systematic, patient search. While I was out of the house, at the grocery store, volunteering at the library, she would have been hunting. She would have moved with the quiet, methodical purpose of a burglar in her own brother's home. She would have searched the desk drawers, the filing cabinets, the predictable places. And then, finally, she would have gone to my closet. I can picture the moment perfectly, her hands sifting through my old coats, feeling for any hidden pockets. And then, the discovery. The old dusty shoebox, the weight of it, the thrill of anticipation as she lifted the lid, and the sight of it. $50,000 in neat, bundled stacks. To her, it must have felt like a miracle, a validation of her entire life's philosophy, that if you waited long enough, someone else would always provide a shortcut. She did not take it immediately. She was smarter than that. She was a performer, and she knew her final scene required a motivation, a justification for her actions. She created a crisis. She came to me one evening, her face a mask of frantic, tearful desperation. "David, I've done something terrible," she sobbed, clutching a fake letter from a loan shark. "An old debt. I thought it was settled. They found me. They're threatening me. They're threatening to hurt Emily if I don't pay them $30,000 by the end of the week." It was a good story. It had stakes, a villain, and an innocent child in peril. It was designed to trigger my deepest protective instincts. The old David. The David before Susan's final lesson would have believed her without question. He would have drained his accounts to save his niece. But I was no longer that man. I looked at her perfectly rehearsed performance, and I felt nothing but a profound, weary sadness. The test was over. She had failed. "That is a terrible situation, Sarah," I said, my voice carefully neutral. "I'm so sorry to hear that." "Sorry?" she shrieked, her performance escalating. "I don't need you to be sorry, David. I need you to help me. You're my brother. You're the only one I have." "I have helped you, Sarah," I replied, my voice still quiet. "I have given you a home. I have put food on your table. I have given you a month of safety to find a job and get your life in order. The rest is up to you." "But I don't have time," she cried. "They'll be here in 2 days." "Then I suggest you start making some difficult choices," I said. I then stood up and walked away, leaving her alone in the living room with her manufactured crisis. I had given her the final push. I had removed myself as the easy solution, forcing her to take the one she had already discovered. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard the faint creak of the floorboards outside my room, then the soft click of my closet door opening and closing. She was so quiet, so careful. I felt a tear, hot and bitter, escape my eye and trace a path down my temple. It was not a tear for the money. It was a tear for the sister I had just lost forever. I had a small, discreet security camera in my room, one I had installed after Susan's passing, a simple device for peace of mind. The next morning, I checked the footage. There she was, a ghostly figure in the infrared light, silently entering my closet, emerging a moment later with the shoebox, her movements filled with a grim, triumphant purpose. The final, undeniable proof. I was scheduled to leave for a weekend volunteer trip with my church, a trip I had told her about weeks in advance. It was the perfect window of opportunity for her. As I packed my bag that morning, she was the picture of loving concern. "Are you sure you have to go, David?" she asked, her voice filled with a fake anxiety. "You seem so tired. Maybe you should stay home and rest." She wasn't worried about my health. She was worried I might delay my departure and ruin her escape plan. "I'll be fine, Sarah," I said, looking her directly in the eye. "There are good people at the church. They'll look after me." I paused, then added, "You be safe too. You and Emily." As I drove away from my house, I did not look back. I knew that when I returned, she would be gone, and so would the money. But something else would be gone too. The last lingering shred of my hope for her redemption. When I returned 2 days later, the house was just as I had expected. Empty, silent. She had taken the money. She had taken a few of Susan's smaller, more valuable pieces of jewelry, and she had taken her daughter, my niece Emily. She had left no note, no explanation, just a cold, empty space where a family used to be. I stood in the center of the silent living room, the grief, the anger, the profound sense of loss. It was all there. But beneath it, there was something else, a new, cold, and unfamiliar feeling. It was the feeling of resolve, the feeling of a promise that now had to be kept. Susan had been right. I had given Sarah every chance. Now, it was time to let her face the consequences. But more importantly, it was time to fulfill my true promise to my wife. It was time to save Emily. I walked to the wall in my study, the wall that looked like any other. I took down the large framed portrait of Susan that hung there. Behind it, flush with the wall, was the keypad for a state-of-the-art hidden safe. Sarah had searched for a shoebox. She had never even considered looking for a fortress. Entered the code and the heavy steel door swung open with a quiet, satisfying hiss. She thought she had stolen my savings. She thought she had left me destitute. She had no idea she had only stolen the bait. The real inheritance, the trust fund for Emily, the legacy of my wife's love and foresight. It was all right here, safe, untouched. And now, it was time to use it. For 2 days, I did nothing. I let the trail go cold. It was a deliberate, calculated inaction, a lesson I had learned from years of auditing complex financial fraud cases. The first 48 hours after a crime are when the perpetrator is most alert, most paranoid. They expect pursuit. They expect immediate consequences. When none come, they begin to relax. Their arrogance returns. They grow careless. And it is in that carelessness that they make their fatal mistakes. I spent those 2 days not in grief, but in preparation. I was an accountant preparing for the most important audit of my life. My quiet suburban home became a command center. I sat at my desk, surrounded by maps, by bank records, by the digital tools of a modern manhunt. My promise to Susan was twofold. First, to test Sarah, and second, if she failed, to protect Emily. The first part of that promise was now a painful, accomplished fact. It was time for the second. My wife had called my kindness a weakness, but my true strength, the one she had always relied on, was my meticulous, almost obsessive attention to detail. Sarah believed she had executed a perfect, untraceable crime. She had taken cash, a few pieces of jewelry, and disappeared. But she had no idea that I had salted the earth of her escape route with a series of invisible, technological breadcrumbs. The first was the money itself. Before placing the $50,000 in the shoebox, I had taken the bundled stacks to my bank. Under the guise of a security measure, I had asked them to record the serial numbers of every single $100 bill. It was a tedious, unusual request, but as a long-time valued client, they had obliged. I now possessed a digital list of 500 unique identifiers, a list I had already flagged with federal law enforcement agencies that track the movement of currency. The moment one of those bills was used in a transaction at a major bank, a casino, or a currency exchange, it would trigger a silent alarm. The cash was not a treasure. It was a tracking device. The second breadcrumb was the jewelry. Most of the pieces she took were valuable but anonymous. But I had made sure to leave one particular item in the jewelry box, nestled amongst the diamonds and gold. It was a beautiful, antique sapphire brooch that had belonged to Susan's grandmother. It was unique, easily identifiable, and I knew Sarah, with her love of expensive, showy things, would be unable to resist taking it. I had already distributed a high-resolution photograph of that brooch, along with its detailed appraisal records, to a network of high-end pawn shops and jewelers across the country, offering a substantial reward for any information regarding its sale. And the final, most important breadcrumb was my niece, Emily. I knew Sarah would not abandon her. Emily was not just her daughter. She was her shield, her emotional leverage, her alibi. I also knew that Emily was a creature of habit. She had a favorite series of fantasy novels, an online game she played with her school friends, a social media account where she posted pictures of her drawings. Before Sarah had arrived, I had, with a heavy heart and a sense of profound intrusion, installed a discreet monitoring software on the tablet I had gifted Emily for her birthday. It was a terrible violation of her privacy, but I knew it might be the only lifeline I had to her. My promise to protect her superseded all else. On the third day, I began my hunt. I opened my laptop and looked at the data streaming from Emily's tablet. As expected, Sarah had disabled its GPS, but she had forgotten about the Wi-Fi. The device was connecting to public networks, each one leaving a digital footprint, a breadcrumb on a map. I saw a connection from a coffee shop in a small town just across the state line. Then, a few hours later, another from a motel 100 miles further west. They were moving, but they weren't moving fast. And then I saw the activity that truly mattered. Emily had logged into her online game. She was playing with her friends. I couldn't see her chats, but I could see her username, active, a small green light in a vast digital darkness. I had my proof of life. I knew she was, at least for the moment, safe. Now that I had my anchor, it was time to tighten the net. Fracas. Pattern of their movement was clear. They were heading west, towards the one place in the country where a large amount of untraceable cash and a desperate, foolish person could disappear into a sea of bright lights and broken dreams. They were heading to Las Vegas. It was a predictable, amateur move, and it confirmed what I already knew. Sarah was not a master criminal. She was a desperate woman, following the oldest, most cliched script in the book, and that made her predictable. It made her vulnerable. I picked up the phone and made my second call. My first call had been to the police to file a formal but low-priority missing persons report on Emily, a report that officially documented my concern and started a legal clock. This call was different. It was to an old friend, a man named Marcus Thorne. Marcus and I had served on a non-profit board together for years. He was a retired police detective who had, after 20 years on the force, taken a job as the head of security for the Olympus, one of the largest and most powerful casino resorts in Las Vegas. "Marcus," I said, my voice calm and professional. "It's David. I have a problem, and I believe its solution may be walking into your city in the very near future." I explained the entire situation to Marcus, from Sarah's long history of irresponsibility to the final calculated betrayal. I didn't present it as a desperate family drama. I presented it as a security problem. A vulnerable 10-year-old child was in the care of an unstable, desperate woman with $50,000 in cash and a history of a gambling addiction. I was not asking him to be a vigilante. I was asking him to be a professional, to use his considerable resources to ensure the safety of a child within his jurisdiction. "So, you're not trying to get the money back?" Marcus asked, his old detective's mind cutting straight to the core of the matter. "The money is just a tool, Marcus," I replied. "It's the tracking device. My only priority is my niece, Emily. I need to get her out of that environment before Sarah's fantasy implodes, because we both know it will. I just need to know where she is, and I need to know that she's safe." "Understood," he said, his voice all business. "Send me everything you have. The photo of the brooch, the list of serial numbers, a picture of your sister and your niece. My team is the best in the business. If she's in this city, we'll find her. I'll put my people at the high-end jewelry exchanges and the pawn shops on alert immediately. The brooch is your best bet. A woman like your sister, with a sudden influx of cash, won't be able to resist showing it off or trying to liquidate it." He was right. For the next few days, my home became a remote surveillance station. Marcus and I were in constant, quiet contact. Emily's tablet showed her connecting to the Wi-Fi at the Olympus Hotel, a place far too expensive and decadent for a woman trying to start a new life, but perfectly in character for Sarah. Marcus confirmed it. His internal security team had spotted them. Sarah had checked into a high-roller suite, paying for a week in advance with a thick stack of $100 bills. The serial numbers from those bills immediately triggered a silent flag in the casino's cash handling system. Marcus now knew that a portion of my bait was officially in play. right inside his own building. The reports he gave me painted a grim, predictable picture. Sarah was living out a fantasy. She spent her days at the designer boutiques that lined the casino's promenade, buying clothes, shoes, and handbags with a frantic, desperate energy. She spent her evenings at the high-stakes, poker tables, trying to turn her stolen $50,000 into a real fortune. She was not a good gambler. Her small wins were celebrated with expensive champagne, and her larger, more frequent losses were chased with bigger, more reckless bets. And my niece Emily was a ghost in this narrative. She was, as Marcus's team reported, almost always left, alone in the hotel suite. Room service trays would be delivered and left in the hallway. The television was always on. She was a prisoner in a gilded cage, a silent, neglected witness to her mother's self-destruction. The knowledge of her isolation was a constant, dull ache in my chest, but I had to hold my course. A premature rescue would only allow Sarah to play the victim, to claim I had stolen her child. I had to wait for her to make the final, irrefutable move that would prove her unfitness as a mother. That move came 5 days after she arrived in Vegas. Marcus called me, his voice tight. "We've got a hit, David," he said. "The brooch. She just walked into a high-end jewelry exchange in the lobby." This was it. The selling of Susan's jewelry was more than just a financial act. It was a symbolic one. It was the final callous act of a woman willing to sell off the last remnants of her family's love for a few more chips at the poker table. "Is she selling it?" I asked, my own voice tight. "She's trying to," Marcus replied. "The jeweler is a friend of mine." He recognized the piece immediately from the photos I sent him. He knows the protocol. He is currently appraising it, a process that will take him a very, very long time. He's keeping her occupied. But David, this is where it gets complicated. The moment he officially reports it as a potentially stolen item, the local police will have to be notified. It will become a criminal matter. Are you prepared for that? I thought of my promise to Susan. Don't just punish her, David. Teach her. A criminal record, an arrest. That was not a lesson. That was a life sentence. It would destroy any chance she had of ever being a real mother to Emily. There had to be another way. A final, more personal reckoning. "No," I said, a new plan, forming in my mind with a sudden, cold clarity. "No police, not yet. Tell your friend to tell her that for a piece of this value, he needs a second opinion, that he needs her to come back in 2 hours. Tell him to stall. I'm on the next flight to Las Vegas. The final lesson needs to be delivered in person." I hung up the phone and booked a one-way ticket. The accountant, the observer, was done. It was time for the brother to step out of the shadows. I was no longer just the architect of the trap. I was now a part of it. The final confrontation was not going to be in a courtroom or a police station. It was going to be in a pawn shop in the heart of Las Vegas, a city built on broken promises and second chances. The flight to Las Vegas was the longest 3 hours of my life. I was no longer a quiet, retired accountant. I was a man on a mission, fueled by a volatile cocktail of grief, anger, and a desperate protective love for my niece. As the plane descended over the glittering electric oasis in the desert, a city I had always despised for its shallow promises, I felt a grim sense of purpose. This place, this monument to illusion and bad choices, was the perfect theater for the final act of my sister's tragedy. Marcus met me at the airport. He was no longer just a voice on the phone. He was a solid, reassuring presence, his old cop's eyes missing nothing. He didn't offer sympathy or condolences. He offered a plan. "She's getting desperate, David," he said as we drove towards the strip, the neon lights washing over his grim face. "She's lost almost all of the cash. The brooch is her last resort. The jeweler has her appointment set for 4 p.m. That gives us just under 2 hours to get in position." "And Emily?" I asked, my voice tight. It was the only question that mattered. "She's in the suite," Marcus replied. My team has a discreet, watch on the floor. She hasn't left the room all day. She's safe. We didn't go to the Olympus. We went to a small anonymous security office in the casino's labyrinthine back corridors, a place of steel doors and monitors that showed 100 different angles of the casino floor. It was the nerve center of Marcus's kingdom, the place where the illusions were managed and the predators were watched. On one of the screens, I saw her, Sarah. She was sitting at a slot machine, a glass of something amber in her hand, her face, a mask of tense, desperate hope. She was a ghost, a pale imitation of the vibrant, laughing sister I remembered from our childhood, her life force being steadily drained by the thirsty, blinking machines around her. She's burning through the last of the cash, Marcus said, his voice a low, clinical observation. By the time she gets to the jewelry store, she'll have nothing left. She'll be at her most desperate and her most dangerous. The plan was simple, elegant, and designed for maximum psychological impact. We would not confront her at the poker table, not in the hotel lobby. The confrontation would happen at the jeweler's, the very scene of her final, most desperate betrayal. Marcus's team, a group of sharp-eyed men and women in plain clothes, moved with a quiet, professional efficiency. One would pose as a customer in the store. Another would be the security guard at the door. Marcus and I would be in a small private viewing room at the back of the store, watching the entire scene unfold on a hidden camera. The purpose was not to arrest her, but to document her. We needed an irrefutable record of her attempt to sell the stolen brooch. This evidence would be my leverage, the tool that would allow me to take the one thing that mattered from her, not out of revenge, but out of necessity, custody of Emily. As we walked through the controlled chaos of the casino floor towards the jewelry store, a wave of profound sadness washed over me. I looked at the faces of the people around me, the hopeful tourists, the desperate locals, the ghosts like my sister, all chasing a phantom of easy wealth. This was the world that had seduced her. The world that had promised her everything and had given her nothing but debt and despair. We took our places in the small, dark viewing room. The one-way mirror looked out onto the plush, silent showroom of the jewelry store. It felt like an interrogation room, a place where truths were about to be painfully extracted. On the monitor, I could see Sarah. She was pacing outside the store, checking her watch, her movements jerky and nervous. The clock on the wall ticked towards 4 p.m. with an agonizing slowness. Each tick was a hammer blow against my heart. I thought of Susan, of the promise I had made to her. Be strong enough to let her go. I had thought that meant letting her walk away. I realized now in this dark, quiet room that it meant something far harder. It meant being strong enough to intervene, to be the agent of her consequence, to save her from the abyss she was so determined to leap into. At precisely 4 p.m., Sarah took a deep, shaky breath and pushed open the heavy glass door of the jewelry store. She walked in, clutching the small box that contained my wife's brooch, a piece of our family's history that she was about to trade for a few more hours of illusion. The stage was set. The final actor had made her entrance, and from the shadows, I watched, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest as the final, heartbreaking scene of my sister's downfall began to play out. Through the one-way mirror, I watched as my sister, Sarah, approached the counter. The jeweler, a man named Mr. Alistair, a trusted friend of Marcus's, greeted her with a polite, professional smile. He played his part perfectly. "Ms. Sarah," he began, his voice calm and smooth, a sound I could hear clearly through the discreet audio feed. "Thank you for returning. I have had our gemologist examine the piece. It is, as I suspected, quite extraordinary." I saw Sarah's shoulders relax slightly. The tension in her posture eased. She saw the finish line. She saw a pile of cash, another chance to chase her losses at the poker table. "So," she said, her voice a little too eager, "what is it worth?" "That is a complex question, Mr. Alastair replied, drawing out the moment with an actor's timing. The sapphires are of exceptional quality, old world salon. The diamond work is exquisite. But the true value, of course, is in its provenance. A piece like this? Its story is everything. Do you have any documentation, any history? It's a family heirloom, Sarah lied smoothly, a story she had likely rehearsed a dozen times. It belonged to my grandmother. It has been in our family for generations. My grandmother. She was invoking the memory of a woman who had valued honesty above all else to sell a stolen treasure. The casual sacrilege of it made my blood run cold. See, Mr. Alastair said, peering at the brooch through a jeweler's loupe. Well, based on its craftsmanship and materials alone, I would be prepared to offer you $20,000 in cash today. $20,000. It was a lowball offer, far less than its actual six-figure value, but it was a significant sum, a lifeline to a desperate gambler. I saw the greed and relief warring in Sarah's eyes. She was about to agree. She was about to sell her mother's memory for the price of a used car. This was the moment, the point of no return. I believe the piece is worth considerably more than that, a new voice said, calm and clear. Sarah froze. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrified disbelief. I stepped out from the back room, moving from the shadows into the bright, unforgiving light of the showroom. Marcus followed a pace behind me, a silent, imposing presence. David, she whispered, the name a choked, strangled sound. The color drained from her face, leaving a pasty, grayish pallor beneath her. Expensive makeup. She looked like a cornered animal, her eyes darting from me to Marcus, then to the security guard at the door, suddenly realizing the exits were all closed. What are you doing here? She stammered. I believe, I said, my voice quiet, even that you have something that belongs to me, that belongs to Susan. I gestured to the sapphire brooch lying there on the velvet tray between us, a silent, glittering accusation. Her first instinct was to lie, the deeply ingrained habit of a lifetime. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, her voice trembling. This was my mother's. She gave it to me. Did she? I asked, my voice still quiet, but with an edge of cold, hard steel that she had never heard from me before. Did she give it to you before or after she passed away, Sarah? Because my memory, which is quite clear, is that this brooch was in her jewelry box, in my house, until the day you and your daughter disappeared along with $50,000 of my life savings. I saw the fight go out of her. The lie was too big, the truth too stark. She crumpled, leaning against the counter for support, her carefully constructed world dissolving around her. How? Was all she could manage to whisper. I placed the small, discreet GPS tracker on the glass counter next to the brooch. It was no bigger than a coin. You were always careless with the details, Sarah, I said. You were so focused on the big score. You never thought to check the lining of the cash box. She stared at the small, blinking light, the tiny technological traitor that had led me to her. Her mind, quick and manipulative, was already trying to calculate a new angle, a new story. I could see it in her eyes. She was about to weave a new tale of desperation, of being forced into this by circumstances beyond her control. But I did not give her the chance. The time for stories is over, Sarah, I said, my voice cutting through her unspoken excuses. The time for lies is over. Now, for the first time in a very long time, we are going to deal only with the truth. And the truth is this: you are a thief, you are an addict, and you are an unfit mother who has endangered her own child for the sake of a poker game. Each word was a deliberate, precisely aimed blow, stripping away her defenses, leaving her exposed and vulnerable. You have no idea what it's been like, she finally cried, her voice rising with a familiar, self-pitying wail. The debts, the pressure. Enough! The word exploded from me, a lifetime of suppressed anger and frustration finally unleashed. The force of it made her flinch, made the jeweler take a step back. The quiet, passive accountant was gone. My brother, who had been betrayed one too many times, was now here. My shout echoed in the pristine, silent showroom, a raw, jagged sound of pure, undiluted pain. Sarah stared at me, her mouth agape, her eyes wide with a fear I had never seen from her before. She had never seen this man, this brother who was no longer willing to absorb her chaos, to cushion her falls. "You speak of pressure?" I continued, my voice now a low, trembling growl of contained fury. "Let me tell you about pressure, Sarah. Pressure is holding your dying wife's hand, knowing that her own sister, the woman she helped raise, is at that very moment racking up debts at a card table. Pressure is discovering that the money you saved for your own quiet old age has been stolen by that same sister, not to feed her child, but to feed a slot machine. Pressure." And here, my voice broke for a moment, the raw grief tearing through. The anger is knowing that your innocent 10-year-old niece is locked alone in a hotel room while her mother chases a losing hand, praying for a miracle that will never come. I let my words hang in the air, a devastating indictment of her entire life. I saw the fight, the defiance, the self-pity drain away from her, replaced by a creeping, horrifying shame. For the first time, she was seeing her actions not through the distorting lens of her own self-justification, but through my eyes, through the eyes of the brother she had so profoundly and repeatedly betrayed. "I am not here to get the money back, Sarah," I said, my voice quiet again, but with a new chilling finality. "The money is already gone, isn't it? You've burned through almost all of it. This," I said, gesturing to the brooch, "was your last stand, your final desperate bet." She could only nod, tears now streaming silently down her face, washing away the last of her carefully applied makeup. "I am not here to call the police," I continued. "Though, make no mistake, I have enough evidence of theft, of fraud, of child endangerment to ensure you spend the next several years in a place where your biggest gamble will be on which bland meal they serve for dinner." She flinched, the reality of that possible future a stark, terrifying image. "No," I said, "I am not here to do either of those things. I am here to honor a promise. My final promise to my wife, Susan. She made me promise to protect Emily, to give her a future. And I have come to the heartbreaking conclusion that the only way to protect Emily is to protect her from you." This was the final blow, the one that struck at the very core of her identity. I was not just taking her money, I was threatening to take her child. "You can't," she whispered, her voice a fragile, broken thing. "You can't take my daughter. I'm her mother." "A mother," I replied, my voice as cold and hard as the diamonds in the display case, "does not leave her child alone for days in a hotel room. A mother does not steal money meant for that child's future to feed an addiction. You stopped being a mother the moment you chose that poker table over your own daughter's well-being." I leaned forward, and I delivered my ultimatum. It was the hardest, most necessary thing I have ever done. "So, here are your two choices, Sarah," I said, "and you will choose right here, right now. Choice number one, I walk out of this store. Marcus calls the police. You are arrested, and Emily is placed into the foster care system, a ward of the state. I will fight for custody, of course, but the legal process is long and ugly, and she will be lost in the system for months, perhaps years. Your life as you know it is over." She stared at me, her face a mask of utter horror. "Or," I continued, my voice softening slightly, "choice number two. You hand over what's left of the money. You hand over the brooch. You walk out of this casino and you get into the car that is waiting outside. It will take you directly to a place called Second Chance, a long-term treatment facility for gambling addiction, a place I have already paid for. You will commit to a minimum of 1 year of inpatient treatment. You will do the hard, painful work of facing your demons, of rebuilding your life from the ground up. And Emily, she whispered, her voice trembling. And while you are doing that, I said, delivering the final devastating term, I will take Emily home with me. I will assume full legal guardianship. I will give her the stable, loving, and predictable life that you have been incapable of providing. I will protect her. And if, and only if, you complete your program, if you can prove to me and to the world that you are truly a different person, a healthy person, a mother worthy of that title, then we can talk about you being a part of her life again, not as her guardian, but as her mother. I stood back, the choice laid bare before her. It was a brutal, almost impossible choice, her freedom or her daughter's future. The life of addiction she craved, or the long, hard path to a redemption she might never fully achieve. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a lifetime of pain, of bad choices, of roads not taken. She looked at the brooch, the symbol of the easy money she had chased. And then she looked through the one-way mirror, though she couldn't see me, as if she was looking for a ghost, for her brother, for the man who had always saved her. But that man was gone. In his place was the executor of his wife's final, heartbreaking will. The silence in that sterile, glittering showroom stretched for what felt like an eternity. It was the silence of a life hanging in the balance, a soul poised on a razor's edge. I watched my sister's face, a battlefield of conflicting emotions. The gambler's desperate urge to run, the addict's terror of a life without her drug, and somewhere deep beneath it all, the flickering, almost extinguished ember of a mother's love. Finally, with a slow, agonizing deliberation, she pushed the sapphire brooch across the glass counter, towards me. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a thick, crumpled envelope of cash. What was left of my life's savings. She pushed that across the counter, too. She had made her choice. She had chosen her daughter. She didn't say a word. She couldn't. She just looked at me, her eyes filled with a universe of pain and regret. And then she turned. Marcus nodded to his security guard who escorted her, not as a prisoner, but as a person in need of help, out of the store and to the waiting car. That would begin the longest journey of her life. I stood there for a long moment, the stolen money and the rescued heirloom feeling impossibly heavy in my hands. I had won. I had kept my promise to Susan. I had saved my niece. But it was a victory that felt, in every way that mattered, like a profound and terrible loss. The journey home with Emily was quiet. I did not tell her the full, ugly truth of what her mother had done. How do you tell a 10-year-old child that their mother chose a slot machine over them? I simply told her that her mother was sick, that she had gone to a special kind of hospital to get better, and that for a while she would be living with me. She accepted this with a child's quiet, sad resignation. She was a girl who was already too accustomed to the chaos of a life with Sarah. My house, which had felt so empty after Susan's death, was suddenly filled with a new, quiet purpose. Emily's presence was a balm to my lonely soul. We fell into a gentle, predictable routine. I would make her breakfast, walk her to school, and help her with her homework at the kitchen table, just as I had with her mother, my own daughter, so many years ago. In her, I saw a second chance, a chance to get it right. I did not spoil her. I did not try to buy her affection. I gave her what she had never had: stability, predictability, unwavering, unconditional presence. We planted a new garden together. We read history books in the evening. I taught her the quiet, methodical joy of accounting, of bringing order to the chaos of numbers. I was not just her guardian. I was her teacher, and she, my brightest and most important student. A year passed. Emily began to blossom, the anxiety and fear in her eyes replaced by a child's natural confidence and joy. We received regular formal reports from the treatment center. They spoke of Sarah's progress, of her struggles, of her slow, painful journey through the wreckage of her past. There were no personal letters. I did not expect any. Then, one day, a package arrived. It was for Emily. Inside was a small, hand-knitted scarf in her favorite shade of blue. There was no note, just a simple gift tag that read, "For my Emily, love, Mom." It was the first sign. The first fragile green shoot emerging from the salted earth of her past. The true resolution came almost 2 years after that day in Las Vegas. Sarah had completed her program. She was living in a halfway house, working a steady, humble job as a bookkeeper for a local charity. She had not asked for anything. She had not demanded to see her daughter. She was, for the first time in her life, quietly, patiently, earning her way back. I took Emily to visit her. The meeting was awkward, tentative. But as I watched them talk, I saw something I had not seen in decades. I saw my sister, the real Sarah, the one who existed before the chaos, before the addiction, before the lies. And I saw Emily, no longer a victim, but a strong, compassionate young woman looking at her mother not with anger, but with a quiet, cautious hope. That evening, after we had returned home, I took Emily to my study. I walked to the wall, took down the portrait of Susan, and opened the safe. "This," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "is the real inheritance your Aunt Susan left for you." I showed her the trust documents, the savings, the secure future that her aunt's love and foresight had protected for her. But then I showed her the other things. The albums filled with photos of her mother as a happy, vibrant young girl. The letters Susan had written to me, filled with her worries and her boundless love for her sister-in-law. "Your mother is not a bad person, Emily," I said. "She is a good person who made a series of very bad choices. Your Aunt Susan knew that, and she didn't set up this trust to punish her. She set it up to protect you and to give your mother the one thing she truly needed, the freedom to fail and the chance to find her own way back." I had not been the avenging brother that day in Las Vegas. I had been the executor of my wife's final, complex, and deeply compassionate will. My promise was not to punish my sister, but to save my family. Sometimes saving a family means making the hardest choices, breaking things apart so they can be rebuilt on a stronger foundation. It was the last, most difficult lesson in accounting I had ever learned. Sometimes, to save the most valuable asset, you have to be willing to write off the bad debt. If this story of difficult choices and the long road to redemption has touched your heart, please show your support by liking and sharing this video. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that explore the complex balance between justice and compassion. Thank you for watching.